US President Donald Trump has arrived in Saudi Arabia on the first leg of a multi-day Middle East tour. Trump was welcomed personally on the tarmac in Riyadh by the kingdom's de facto ruler, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. The two are expected to hold talks on ending the war in Gaza, dismantling Iran's nuclear program, the price of oil and more. Trump is also scheduled to visit the Gulf states of Qatar and the United Arab Emirates. A short while ago, I asked our Jerusalem correspondent Emily Gordine about the visit and what's been planned.
Well, I mean, you said it there yourself. This is the first major diplomatic visit of Donald Trump in his second term. And upon arrival in Saudi Arabia, his plane was escorted by two F-15 fighter jets. When he landed, he was greeted. They rolled out the purple royal carpet for him before being greeted by Mohammed bin Salman, the Saudi crown prince. And I think we're going to expect a lot of this pomp and pageantry throughout this trip. Of course, this aside with business. Now, today he is expected to receive a large welcome ceremony in Riyadh, that to go hand in hand with meetings between officials to foster possible investments, possible deals that Trump has been eyeing. Then tomorrow he is expected to attend a summit with Gulf leaders before heading to Qatar, and then he will end his trip on Thursday in the United Arab Emirates.
Emily Gordine there reporting from Jerusalem. But it's, of course, it's not Donald Trump's first visit to Saudi Arabia. A visit there was one of the highlights of his first term as president. The kingdom has helped his administration with diplomatic outreach to Russia and promised huge investments in the US, as well as in Trump-owned companies.
Donald Trump and the Saudis have been dancing closely since his visit to the kingdom in 2017. It was his first state trip of his first presidency, during which both parties kept mostly in step, using each other for diplomatic and financial gain.
Tremendous investments into the United States, and our military community is very happy, and we want to thank you and Saudi Arabia. Hundreds of billions of dollars of investments into the United States, and jobs, jobs, jobs.
But he left without achieving his goal of normalizing relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel. That was derailed by the October 7 Hamas terrorist attack and Israel's devastating response. The Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman accused Israel of committing genocide in Gaza. He opposes Trump's plan for a US-led takeover of war-ravaged Gaza and demands the creation of a Palestinian state there, which Israel rejects. But Trump has been successful in using Saudi Arabia as a conduit to Moscow as he seeks to secure an end to Russia's war on Ukraine. In February, the kingdom hosted the first direct Russian-American talks since Moscow's full-scale invasion. And later, a meeting between Ukrainian and US delegations, providing neutral ground and gaining global prestige. Now, the Saudis are calling in their favors, securing the purchase of $3.5 billion worth of US-made missiles. Trump is also considering a further $100 billion arms sale to the Saudis, whose access to US weapons had been restricted. And the US has signed an agreement to help them develop a civil nuclear energy program. Trump has sky-high expectations for US-Saudi business. He's made it clear why he's returning to Riyadh as the first state visit of his second term.
So I said, I'll go if you pay $1 trillion, $1 trillion to American companies, meaning the purchase over a 4-year period of $1 trillion. And they've agreed to do that. So I'm going to be going there.
Trump himself is one of the biggest winners. His golf courses have hosted tournaments backed by the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund, which has also pumped billions of dollars into a fund run by Trump's family members. And new Trump-branded towers and resorts are set to be constructed in the kingdom and the region, funded by Saudi investments. The legacy of his close ties with the kingdom will one day blaze across the Saudi Arabian skyline.
Let's get more now from Andreas Krieg. He's a Middle East expert from the School of Security Studies in King's College, London. Dr. Krieg, welcome. What does President Trump want from his visit to Saudi Arabia?
Well, I mean, if you had to bring one headline in, it would be deals, deals, deals. And that's not just economic deals, financial deals and investments. It's also geostrategic deals. Obviously, Trump comes after a period of at least economic turmoil in the United States, a lot of bad headlines for him within the domestic audience. And he's now coming to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE to kind of get some positive headlines. And I think deals will provide him with that, not just potentially hundreds of billions worth of investments from the GCC, but also very positive geostrategic deals involving Iran, Yemen, potentially Palestine, Israel, Syria. So there's a wide array of different sort of opportunities for him to shine, to show that MAGA is delivering, to show that he's delivering on multiple fronts, and particularly on two key issues to do with the Make America Great Again sort of agenda, which is one, increasing investment into the United States. That's what the Gulf states can deliver. And second, allowing the United States to basically withdraw from the Middle East and kind of hand over the burden of conflict resolution, conflict management, and statecraft to local partners. And these three local partners are Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE.
And are these three partners really trustworthy partners?
Absolutely. I think what we've seen here over the last decade or so is a major shift in the geostrategic equilibrium, where the sort of center of gravity in the region has shifted from the old powerhouses in the Levant to the shores of the Gulf. They're the most financially stable, and they're the ones who have probably the most forward-looking grand strategic outlook towards the region, and they're willing and able to bear the burden of conflict. And let me add this, I think Saudi, Qatar, and the UAE have become net contributors to US power projection in the region rather than net consumers of power, of US power, which is a massive shift. I mean, 20 years ago, most of these countries would have consumed US power. Now they're contributing to it. And if you will, they are somewhat a net exporter of influence that supports the US agenda in the region, and that makes them absolutely indispensable.
You were talking about geostrategic deals. I mean, Donald Trump is visiting these three countries, as you mentioned there, but a country that he's not visiting, a key player in the Middle East, and you know where I'm going, this is Israel. He's not visiting Israel. Yet you have a senior Israeli defense official saying that he sees this as a window of opportunity for a hostage deal in Gaza. Do you see it in the same light?
Absolutely. I mean, it just is testimony to how irrelevant the Netanyahu government has become. And go back to my previous term that I used there. I think as the Gulf states becoming net contributors to US power, the Israelis become ever more net consumers of US power. They are dragging the United States into quagmires that at least the MAGA agenda of making America great again want to withdraw from. They want to get out of the Middle East, and the Netanyahu government has been on the record for the last 30 years, dragging the United States into wars within Iraq, war in Iran. And as obviously Trump and Whitcomb in particular, they want to make deals. They want to have a deal with Iran. They want to have a deal with Hamas to get the hostages back. They want deals to solve the issue in Yemen, and the Omanis have delivered on that. The Israeli government is an outlier. They're not. Israel has been the single biggest obstructor of any deal, of any resolution in Gaza or elsewhere. And on top of that, have been probably the biggest disruptor when it comes to Lebanon, to Syria. So Israel has become a problem in the MAGA agenda. We see that in Washington, while the Gulf states are somewhat a solution to many of the MAGA problems.
You're talking about deals and solutions. President Trump had his Gaza relocation plan that he touted in February, involving the relocation of people from Gaza to territories in the region. Saudi Arabia was very fervently against it. Does that bring some daylight between Saudi Arabia and America, or are they on the same page?
The thing with Donald Trump is Donald Trump doesn't have an overall well set out plan of what he wants. He knows what he doesn't want. So this whole Riviera plan was one of his many ludicrous ideas that he had. That was immediately met with massive opposition around the world. Probably Israel was the only country that embraced it. And so I think the Saudis made it clear, the countries have made it clear as well, that this is not going to fly. And if Trump wants a deal or deals with the Gulf countries, they will make sure that this is not going to happen. And that is sort of the weight that the Gulf will put behind it.
We'll leave it there for the moment. Andreas, Krieg, Middle East expert from the School of Security Studies at King's College. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, well, for more on this, Giorgio Cafiero joins us now. He's from Gulf State Analytics. Great to have you on DW News. So what's Donald Trump looking to get out of this trip to the Middle East, Giorgio?
Yeah, great to be back on DW. You know, there are many crises in the Middle East right now, and also the conflict in Ukraine. And we know that the Trump administration very much values Washington's alliances and partnerships with these three Gulf Arab states that Trump will be visiting this week in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE. Important in these discussions will be focus on diplomatic efforts to wind down conflicts in the region and beyond, and to try to find diplomatic solutions. We know that the Americans and the Iranians are engaged in nuclear talks. That's going to be an important topic when Trump's in the Gulf. Also, the situation in post-Assad Syria, Lebanon, Gaza, Yemen, Red Sea security situation. A lot of discussions will be about these very sensitive issues. At the same time, Trump is really counting on the Gulf states to make huge investments in the U.S. economy during his second term. There are obviously some serious economic issues here in the United States, and Trump sees himself really needing a big win at this early stage in his second term, and he wants to come back to the U.S. having secured massive investment deals with the Gulf Arab countries.
Right. Plenty on the agenda, as you've just mentioned there. But you didn't mention one country in particular. Why is Israel not part of the trip?
Well, I think what's going on with the Trump administration's foreign policy is rather interesting. As many have noted, across a number of issues, the Trump administration has somewhat sidelined Israel. This is not to say the Trump administration is walking away from the U.S.-Israel alliance, but rather Trump is not meeting the demands of Netanyahu, and he's sidelining Israel as he goes about trying to find solutions to crises in the region. We saw this with the ceasefire between the U.S. and the Houthis, the administration's decision to begin the nuclear talks with the Iranians in Oman. There's also some buzz about Trump considering a lifting of U.S. sanctions on Syria. Recent news about the dual U.S.-Israeli citizen who is released, and Trump did not go through Israel to secure his release. I think Trump is trying to be a so-called peacemaker. He wants to wind down conflicts in the conflicts in the Middle East, and prevent the U.S. from being bogged down in regional wars, regional disputes, so he can shift attention more to China. And I think the Trump administration views the GCC countries as important from the standpoint of working with the U.S. to resolve these conflicts. Meanwhile, Israel is trying to bring the U.S. into a war with Iran. So I think the Trump administration, to some extent, is shifting its foreign policy to be a little more oriented around America's relationships with the Gulf countries, somewhat sidelining Israel in the process.
Now, Trump has also suggested he travel to Turkey if talks take place between Russia and Ukraine. Could that happen, do you think?
Certainly possible. We don't know what Russia will be willing to do, but there, as the president indicated, depending on circumstances, he might fly to Istanbul after his visits to these three Gulf countries. Obviously, something Trump campaigned on last year, and something he certainly wants to see, is freezing of the conflict in Ukraine. He's been very open about this. This is one of his goals. And I think if Putin and Zelensky are going to meet in Istanbul, and if Trump thinks that his participation could increase the chances of a breakthrough, I would not be surprised if the president shows up, but nothing's guaranteed.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there, Giorgio, but always great to have your analysis on the show. Middle East analyst and CEO and founder of Gulf State Analytics. Thanks for joining us tonight.